She shared her lunch with a silent old man. The next day, a convoy of black SUVs arrived for her. The late October sun cast long shadows across Veterans Memorial Park in downtown Sacramento, where the morning rush of commuters hurried past, without a second glance at the weathered bench beneath the old oak tree. It was here, every day at precisely 11:30 a.m., that Maria Santos would take her lunch break from her job at the nearby community center. Maria was 28, a single mother working 2 jobs to support her 7-year-old daughter, Sophia. Her morning shift at the community center barely paid enough to cover rent, and her evening job cleaning office buildings downtown kept her away from home until nearly midnight. But Maria never complained. She had learned early in life that kindness cost nothing, and dignity wasn't determined by the size of your paycheck. This particular Tuesday, as Maria unwrapped her usual peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the same lunch she'd been packing for 3 months to save money, she noticed him again. The old man. He sat alone at the far end of the park, on a bench that faced the memorial wall where hundreds of names were etched in black granite. His clothes were clean but worn, a faded navy peacoat that had seen better decades, dark trousers with careful patches at the knees, and boots that were polished but cracked with age. His silver hair was neatly combed, and despite his obvious poverty, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that Maria recognized, the same dignity her late father had possessed. For weeks, Maria had watched this elderly man arrive each day around noon, sit silently for exactly 1 hour, then disappear, as quietly as he'd come. He never ate anything, never spoke to anyone, just sat there staring at those names on the wall with an expression that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Today, something was different. Maybe it was the way his shoulders seemed more hunched than usual, or how his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his coat against the cool autumn breeze. Maria found herself studying his face more closely and noticed the hollowness in his cheeks, the way his coat hung loose on his diminished frame. Without overthinking it, Maria stood up and walked across the park. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. The old man turned slowly, and Maria was struck by his eyes, pale blue like winter sky, but kind. Deeply, unmistakably kind. "I hope I'm not bothering you," Maria continued, suddenly feeling foolish. I noticed you come here every day, and I wondered if you might be hungry." She held out half of her sandwich, wrapped neatly in the brown paper bag that Sophia had decorated with crayon drawings of flowers. The old man stared at the offered food for a long moment, then up at Maria's face. His eyes seemed to be taking in everything about her, her worn but clean uniform polo from the community center, her kind smile, the genuine concern in her dark eyes. "That's very thoughtful of you, miss," he said finally, his voice gravelly with disuse but warm. "But I couldn't take your lunch." "Please," Maria insisted, settling onto the bench beside him uninvited. "I made extra today." It was a lie, but a kind one. And honestly, eating alone gets pretty lonely. The old man studied her face again, as if he were trying to memorize it. After a moment, he accepted the sandwich with hands that Maria now noticed bore old scars across the knuckles. "Thank you," he said simply. "I'm Walter." "Maria," she replied, extending her hand. Walter's grip was firm despite his apparent frailty, and Maria felt the calluses of someone who'd worked with his hands his entire life. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching the steady stream of pedestrians hurry past. Maria found herself stealing glances at Walter, noting details she hadn't seen from across the park. His peacoat had military ribbons pinned to the lapel, faded and worn but carefully maintained. There was a small pin she didn't recognize, and what looked like a unit patch that had been mended multiple times. "Are you a veteran?" Maria asked gently. Walter nodded slowly. "Navy." Long time ago. My father was Army, Maria said. He used to come to places like this, too, just to sit and remember. Something shifted in Walter's expression, a recognition, perhaps, or a shared understanding of loss. What was his name? Walter asked. Roberto Santos. He served in Desert Storm. Maria's voice carried both pride and sadness. He passed 5 years ago. Cancer. Walter was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry for your loss. He raised a good daughter. They finished their simple meal together, and when Maria had to return to work, Walter stood and formally shook her hand again. Thank you, Maria Santos, he said. Your kindness means more than you know. Will I see you tomorrow? Maria found herself asking. Walter's smile was small but genuine. I believe you will. As Maria walked back to the community center, she felt lighter somehow. It had been such a simple thing, sharing her lunch, but the gratitude in Walter's eyes had made her feel like she'd done something important. That evening, as she helped Sophia with homework at their small kitchen table, Maria found herself thinking about the old veteran. There had been something in his manner, a formality that seemed almost military even in civilian clothes. And those eyes, they held stories, she was certain of it. Mama, you're smiling, Sophia observed, looking up from her math worksheet. What's making you happy? I made a new friend today, Mija, Maria said, smoothing her daughter's dark hair. An old man who needed some kindness. Did you give him some of your sandwich? Sophia asked with the intuitive wisdom of children. I did. How did you know? Because that's what you always do, Sophia said matter-of-factly. You share everything, even when we don't have much. The next morning, Maria packed her lunch with particular care, making sure to bring enough for 2. She found herself looking forward to seeing Walter again, to hearing more about his service, perhaps learning about the names he stared at so intently on that memorial wall. Her morning at the community center seemed to drag. She was helping elderly residents with their Medicare paperwork when Mrs. Chen, the center director, appeared at her desk looking unusually flustered. Maria, there are some people here to see you, Mrs. Chen said, her voice tight with confusion. People? What kind of people? Government people, Mrs. Chen whispered. They have badges and everything. They're waiting in my office. Maria's heart began to race. As an undocumented immigrant who'd been brought to the country as a child, official. Visits were her worst nightmare. Had something happened with her DACA status? Was this about taxes? Her mind raced through every possible scenario as she followed Mrs. Chen down the hallway. But when she reached the office, the scene was nothing like what she'd feared. 3 individuals in dark suits stood as she entered, a distinguished American woman who appeared to be in her 50s, a tall man with graying temples, and a younger woman with kind eyes who looked like she might be an aide or assistant. Ms. Santos? The older woman stepped forward with a warm smile. I'm Director Sarah Mitchell from the Department of Veterans Affairs, and this is Deputy Director James Harrison. We'd like to speak with you about Walter Kowalski. The name didn't immediately register. I'm sorry, the elderly veteran you had lunch with yesterday, the younger woman clarified gently. In Veterans Memorial Park. Maria's confusion deepened. Is Walter in trouble? Because he didn't do anything wrong, and if this is about Miss Santos, Director Mitchell interrupted with a raised hand and a broader smile. Walter isn't in trouble, and neither are you. May we sit? The next few minutes would be seared into Maria's memory forever. Ms. Santos, Director Mitchell began, once they were all seated. What do you know about Walter Kowalski? Just that he's a Navy veteran who comes to the park every day, Maria said carefully. He seems very kind, and I think he might be homeless or at least struggling financially. Why? Has something happened to him? Director Mitchell exchanged a look with her colleague before continuing. Ms. Santos, Walter Kowalski is not just any veteran. He's a Medal of Honor recipient. The words hung in the air like something tangible. Maria stared at the three officials, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "The Medal of Honor," Deputy Director Harrison repeated. "The highest military decoration awarded by the United States government. Walter earned it in 1968 during the Vietnam War when he single-handedly saved 43 members of his unit during an enemy ambush. He was 22 years old." Maria felt like the room was spinning. "But he was eating half of my peanut butter sandwich yesterday. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days." Director Mitchell's expression grew sad. "Walter has been struggling since his wife died 3 years ago. He lost his house to medical bills from her cancer treatment, and his pride has prevented him from reaching out for the help he's entitled to. We've been trying to locate him for months." "Locate him? Why?" The younger woman leaned forward. "Ms. Santos, there's been a campaign to honor living Medal of Honor recipients in a very special way. Walter was selected to receive a fully furnished apartment in a new veterans housing complex, complete with medical care, meal services, and a monthly stipend. We've been looking for him since August." Maria's mouth fell open. "A campaign?" "Funded by a tech billionaire who wants to honor our most decorated veterans," Director Harrison explained. "When we couldn't find Walter through traditional channels, we started checking places where veterans gather. One of our staff members saw you two together yesterday and recognized him from his military photos. Yesterday, after you shared your lunch with him, Walter did something he hasn't done in months," Director Mitchell continued. "He went to the VA office downtown and asked for help. He told the counselor there about a young woman who'd shown him kindness, and how it reminded him that maybe he was still worth something." Tears were beginning to form in Maria's eyes. "He said that?" "He did. And Ms. Santos, there's more." Director Mitchell reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Walter specifically asked that if he was going to accept help, he wanted to make sure you were recognized for your kindness." "Recognized how?" "The campaign I mentioned has a component for community heroes, people who show extraordinary kindness to veterans. Walter nominated you." Director Mitchell opened the folder. "Ms. Santos, you've been awarded a grant of $50,000 for your compassion and service to veterans." The room went completely silent. Maria stared at the officials, then at the paperwork they were sliding across the desk toward her, then back at their faces. $50,000? Tax-free," the younger woman added with a smile. "Along with priority placement for your daughter at one of the state's best elementary schools, and a full scholarship to any California State University when she's ready." Maria couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. She could only stare at the check with her name printed in. "Official government type. There's one more thing," Director Mitchell said gently. "Walter would very much like to see you again. He's asked if you'd be willing to have lunch with him today, a proper lunch this time." 20 minutes later, Maria found herself in the back of a black SUV, one of 3 that made up what she would later learn was called a security detail. As they pulled up to Veterans Memorial Park, she saw something that made her gasp. The area around Walter's usual bench had been transformed. A small canopy had been set up, under which stood Walter, but not the Walter she recognized. He was clean-shaven, wearing a crisp new suit, and pinned to his lapel was a star-shaped medal suspended from a blue ribbon dotted with white stars. His Medal of Honor. But what struck Maria most was his smile. For the first time since she'd known him, Walter looked genuinely, completely happy. As she approached, Walter stood at attention, a military bearing that suddenly made perfect sense. "Ms. Santos," he said formally, then broke into the warmest smile she'd ever seen. "I believe I owe you lunch." The picnic spread under the canopy looked like something from a magazine. Sandwiches from a high-end deli, fresh fruit, gourmet cookies, and 2 glasses of what appeared to be sparkling cider. "Walter," Maria said, still stunned by everything that had happened, "I can't believe... you're a hero. A real hero." Walter's expression grew serious as they sat down together. "Maria, do you know what heroism really is?" She shook her Head. It's not what you do when everyone's watching and the stakes are clear, he said. It's what you do when nobody's looking and you have no idea if it matters. Yesterday, when you gave half your lunch to a stranger, a hungry old man who had nothing to offer you in return, that was heroism. But what you did in the war... What I did in the war was my job, Walter interrupted gently. I was trained for combat, prepared for the situation I found myself in. But you? You saw someone in need and responded with pure kindness. No training, no preparation, no expectation of reward, just human compassion. They ate their lunch together, and Walter told her stories about his wife Margaret, about the men he'd served with, about the names on the memorial wall that he'd been visiting to honor fallen friends. I come here every day because I made a promise, he explained. I promised that as long as I was alive, they wouldn't be forgotten. But lately, I'd been wondering if I was forgotten too, if I'd become invisible. And then, Maria prompted, and then a young mother gave me half her sandwich and reminded me that kindness still exists in the world, that people still see each other. Walter's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You saved me, Maria Santos. Just as surely as I saved those men in Vietnam, you saved me. As they finished their meal, Director Mitchell approached with a small group of people Maria hadn't noticed before, reporters, photographers, and what appeared to be local officials. If you're comfortable with it, Director Mitchell said, we'd love to share this story, both of your stories. Walter's service and your kindness represent the very best of what America can be. Maria looked at Walter, who nodded encouragingly. Will it help other veterans? Maria asked. It will help people remember that heroes come in all forms, Walter said. Some wear uniforms, some wear work clothes from the community center. Some save lives in combat, others save souls with peanut butter sandwiches. The photographs taken that day would appear in newspapers across the country. Walter, resplendent in his dress uniform with his Medal of Honor prominently displayed, sitting beside Maria in her simple work clothes, both of them smiling like they'd known each other forever. But the image that would stick with Maria forever was simpler. Walter's face when Sophia came running across the park an hour later, released early from school so she could meet her mother's new friend. Are you the man my mama shared her sandwich with? Sophia asked with the directness of children. I am, Walter said, kneeling down to her level. And are you the little girl who drew the flowers on the bag? Sophia beamed. Do you like flowers? I love flowers, Walter said seriously. They remind me that beautiful things can grow anywhere, even in difficult places. 6 months later, Maria received an invitation to Walter's new apartment in the Veterans Housing Complex. The space was beautiful, modern, comfortable, and filled with photographs of his late wife and his military service. But what made Maria happiest was seeing Walter himself. He'd gained healthy weight, his eyes were bright with purpose, and he'd found a new mission, volunteering at the VA to help other veterans access their benefits. I have something for you, Walter said, handing Maria a small wrapped package. Inside was a framed photograph, the one of them sharing lunch on that first day, taken by one of the reporters. But Walter had added something, a small plaque at the bottom that read, Heroes Recognize Heroes, WK. Walter, Maria protested. I'm not a hero. Maria Santos, Walter said with the formal tone she'd come to recognize as his way of making a point. You are exactly the kind of hero this world needs most, the kind who doesn't even know they're being heroic. As Maria drove home that evening, in the reliable used car she'd been able to purchase with part of her grant money, she reflected on how much had changed. Sophia was thriving in her new school, excelling in ways Maria had only dreamed possible. The financial stress that had been Maria's constant companion was gone, replaced by the security of knowing her daughter's future was secure. But more than the money, more than the opportunities, what had changed Maria most was understanding something Walter had taught her, that kindness is never small, never insignificant, never wasted. Every act of compassion ripples outward in ways we can't imagine, touching lives and changing futures in ways we may never know. The following Veterans Day, Maria was invited to speak at the memorial service in the park where she'd first met Walter. As she stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd of veterans, families, and community members, she spotted Walter in the front row, wearing his Medal of Honor and beaming with pride. "A year ago," Maria began, "I learned something important about heroes. I learned that they're not always the people you expect. They're not always the ones with medals or uniforms or recognition. Sometimes, heroes are the people sitting alone on park benches, carrying burdens too heavy for one person to bear. And sometimes, heroes are ordinary people who choose kindness when they have every reason not to." She paused, looking directly at Walter. "I shared half a sandwich with a stranger because my father taught me that we're all just people trying to get by, and sometimes we need each other. I had no idea that this simple act would change both our lives forever. But that's the thing about kindness. It multiplies. It creates connections we never expected and opens doors we never knew existed." As Maria concluded her speech to thunderous applause, Walter stood and began clapping. And soon, the entire crowd was on their feet. But what made Maria's heart full wasn't the applause. It was the sight of Walter's proud smile and the knowledge that their friendship had become exactly what both of them had needed, a reminder that we're never truly alone, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply see each other. Later that evening, as Maria tucked Sophia into bed, her daughter asked, "Mama, do you think you'll keep being friends with Mr. Walter forever?" "I think so, mija," Maria said, smoothing the blankets. "He taught me something very important." "What's that?" "That the best things in life aren't the ones we plan for or work toward. They're the ones that happen when we're just trying to be kind." Sophia considered this with the seriousness of a child processing important information. "Like sharing your sandwich?" "Exactly like sharing your sandwich." As Maria turned off the light and closed the door, she could hear Walter's words echoing. In her mind, heroes recognize heroes. She was beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, he was right. Not because of anything extraordinary she'd done, but because she'd chosen to see a fellow human being when the rest of the world had looked away. And in the end, perhaps that's what heroism really is. Not the ability to perform impossible feats, but the willingness to perform simple acts of human decency when no one is watching and no reward is expected. The convoy of black SUVs had arrived to change her life, but the real transformation had begun the moment she'd decided that no one should eat lunch alone. A truly remarkable reminder that heroes and extraordinary kindness can be found in the most unexpected places. What did you find most inspiring about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone was revealed to be far more than they seemed, or seen an act of kindness change a life? We'd love to hear about it. If stories like this warm your heart and restore your faith in humanity, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more, and click the notification bell so you don't miss our next uplifting tale. Thanks for watching.